Jalen Williams is going to play in Summer League. Why is that important? Plus, who's going to be the second best player on next year's roster? All this and more on today's mailbag episode of Locked On Thunder.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and editor-in-chief over at thunderousintentions.com, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by our good friends over at Birddogs, we're going to dive into a Mailbag Podcast. Everything you need to know about this team that you've asked, you're going to get answered. From trade packages to J-Dub playing in Summer League, Will Dawkins leaving, another question about that, even a bit of a personal question. I'm going to give you my top 5 favorite albums of all time. Believe it or not, someone was interested in that. Today's show, of course, is brought to you by our good friends over at Birddog. Check them out. They have fantastic shorts and even introducing polo shorts as well. We're going to tell you how to get a free Yeti Cooler Style Birddogs cup later on in the show. Jalen Williams announced he is playing in Summer League. He is at least going to play in the Salt Lake City portion, which will be July 3rd through the 6th. Remember, that is how Josh Giddey started out last summer, as only in the Salt Lake City portion. He, of course, played some in Vegas because he wanted to play with Chet Holmgren and begged Sam Presti to play with Chet Holmgren more in the Vegas version. But we at least know right from Jalen Williams that he will be playing July 3rd through the 6th in Salt Lake City in the Summer League. This is something that got Josh Giddey a ton of respect last year from people around the NBA, including Doc Rivers, who publicly said how much that kind of showed Josh Giddey's ability and kind of attitude and everything else. Jalen Williams made a joke that he wants to try his new hairstyle on the court. So it appears that the new hairstyle is here to stay on the court, at least for now. He'll try it out in the Summer League. Maybe he'll go back by the time October rolls around. Who knows? But this is, I believe it was on an ESPN interview, and our good friend Daniel Bell heard it. He's out there covering the finals right now and then relayed it on Twitter. At least I've seen it on Daniel Bell's Twitter. That's all I've seen it on. But I think he also told ESPN. Nonetheless, though, Jalen Williams, Santa Clara Jalen Williams, is going to play in Summer League. This is going to be an extremely fun Summer League. Sam Presti's exit interview made it appear as though Chet Holmgren will play in Summer League. We'll get clarification on that at the draft introductory press conference. And Usman Jang, obviously, will play in Summer League. He kind of said that himself at his exit interview. Jay will likely play in Summer League as well. And then you're going to have, whatever the first round pick ends up being, pick 37, pick 50. It'll be a really fun Summer League roster for OKC, especially for that first leg of it in Salt Lake City. So that's just a little bit of news off the top. Now, let's get into your mailbag questions on today's show. Metajohn says, is there any rule against executives leaving one team for another right before the draft? The Wizards now have OKC's plan, so I'm just wondering. Obviously, there's no rule against it because it just happened with Will Dawkins going to Washington here the other day. Now, I wouldn't be concerned with the fact that the Wizards know, who the Thunder like and what prospect they might be targeting and anything else. I'm sure that that's great to know. I don't think that it really matters all that much in the grand scheme of things. What I would find the most interesting, and just to kind of put it out there, we don't really know the exact timeline on all this, right? Like they could have known that Will Dawkins was leaving the second that Mike Winger was hired in Washington, and then kind of it just didn't trickle out until later on. But whatever the case is, I think it's safe to assume, and again, this is an assumption, but it's safe to assume that Will Dawkins, being the president of basketball operations, working with Sam and Rob Hennigan, I think it's safe to assume that he knows which of these future first-round picks the Thunder like and which of them the Thunder are willing to part with and why they're willing to part with them. And so I think that can make trade talks interesting. You could argue it can make them more seamless. There's less of the kind of runaround, but it could also make them very hard because there's a reason why you would prefer to trade other picks. And if your opposition knows that and they want to use it to counter against you, it can make trade talks kind of die down quickly if they kind of know what you're looking at in terms of future first round picks and which ones you want and don't want. So we'll see if that matters. I wouldn't be concerned about the Wizards knowing which prospects OKC likes. I don't think that really matters, but I would find the trade aspect of it very, very interesting. So I hope that answers your question. It's not, there's no rule against it. And I wouldn't be too concerned about it in general. I think that by the time we get to the draft, we'll kind of have forgotten about this story. But as I say yesterday in the show on Wednesday's podcast, very excited for Will Dawkins. I think that he deserves it. I love that Wizards' new front office, and I think that it'll do great things in Washington. Evan ETM, what team would be the worst possible landing spot for Chris Paul? I want to take a brief pause and say, please go to @EvanETM on Twitter. Look over his Twitter history and donate to his GoFundMe if you're able to. He was in a tragic accident. Really needs our help. It's going to be a road to recovery, but we're all behind Evan ETM. Great guy. You've heard him on this podcast before, asking questions, and every other podcast and community out there for the Thunder. He's a really active member in the Thunder community. So please go check out his GoFundMe at Evan ETM on Twitter. And you can read about what happened to him over the weekend. As always, praying and we're supporting Evan ETM in this journey. But reports are from Shams, Woj, Haynes, all the names that the Suns are going to waive Chris Paul. Now, the reporting was kind of conflicting each other a little bit. It's unclear if they're going to waive Chris Paul and then bring him right back on a smaller deal. But let's just assume that they waive him and it is a traditional waive where he's going to go elsewhere. The worst possible spots are hard to gauge because I think that he is just not going to command a massive contract. And so when you're looking at Chris Paul and what he brings to the table, both on the court and off the court, and it's not going to cost you a pretty penny, it's hard to say, hey, that was a bad move. If I had to pick some bad moves, Atlanta, like if Atlanta wants to keep Young and Murray together and they're not going to trade one of them, this summer, bringing in Chris Paul to that is pretty weird because I don't think, as much as I think that he'll take a cheaper contract, I don't know that he'll take a bench spot. So like, a starting lineup of all three of them is pretty weird. Same scenario for Cleveland. Like Cleveland having to start Mitchell, Garland, and Chris Paul, it would be awkward and weird. And then Philadelphia. Not only the James Harden aspect of it, like, was that beef real? Are they still beefing? Or was that more kind of narrative driven? But also, even if Chris Paul and James Harden come back, were to sign together, you'd have Chris Paul, Harden, and Maxey. If Harden leaves to go to Houston, though, and you have Chris Paul, Maxey, and Embiid and the rest of that roster, maybe that changes the option a bit. Some teams that I love for Chris Paul, I love Boston. I think that would be his best chance to go win a ring. And if you just want to ring chase and get that championship, I think Boston would be the spot to go do it in. Chicago, I think, is in desperate need of a point guard. I think Washington is in need of a point guard and also just some help in terms of like a veteran. Same thing with Orlando. Like, look, Orlando, they have a ton of guards, and they've got to sift through which ones that they want and which ones that they don't want, and who they're going to move on from. But forgetting about the logjam at guard and just putting into perspective what we've seen Chris Paul do for young guards in this league, specifically firsthand here in Oklahoma City, I think that if you're Orlando, you've got to explore that option if Chris Paul's willing to kind of come in and help you kind of mentor these young guards. That'd be a fascinating spot for him. Memphis, he covers for Ja Morant, in the sense of he's going to be the starting point guard. Ja Morant's going to be suspended X amount of games. And then whenever Ja comes back, Chris Paul slides back down to a bench spot if he's ready for that. And then you save his legs, keep him healthy. And in the postseason, you have Ja, you have Chris Paul always on the floor at every moment, and helps your team go try to be a championship contender. And also the off the floor stuff that Chris Paul would help with Ja would be great as well. Not sure that would work out in actuality, though. So we'll see. But those are some bad fits and some good fits. But again, it's hard to call anything a terrible fit when we're discussing Chris Paul. Coming up, who will be the second best player for the Thunder next season? Will it be Jalen Williams? Will it be Chet Holmgren? Will it be our good pal Josh Giddey? Who will it be? We'll talk about that coming up on today's show, as well as many more of your mailbag questions. But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at eBay Motors. Go there right now. eBay Motors is great. You should check them out because you know that just like building a championship team, you need the right fit, and eBay Motors will get you that right fit for your vehicle. Every part has to fit just right. So the next time that you need a part, an accessory for your car, follow up with eBay Motors with the guaranteed fit. They'll be sure to have the part you need the first time around. You can add it to My Garage, get the green check that you're looking for, that the part will fit, or your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. When you shop at eBay Motors, and with over 122 million parts to choose from, you can get back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy, and it'll bring you home a winner whenever you go there right now with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions apply. Check it out today at eBay Motors. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning. Every single day, we're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. We've got it all for you on today's show. We are talking about your mailbag questions. Also, we're in the midst of our NBA draft dash to the draft, and so we'll have a podcast for you Monday through Friday and Saturday and Sunday as well, all 7 days from now through the draft, talking about the Thunder, the draft, and everything else, including your mailbag questions. So this one from Chef. Who will be the second best player on the Thunder next season? Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, or Josh Giddey? I would have to rank them. And I will say that this is going to be a good problem to have. It's going to be a good problem to have the debate of who is number 2, who's number 3, who's number 4 between all these guys. Obviously, Shea is the undisputed number 1. But I would say next year, Jalen Williams is number 2 behind Shea. I think that his game is more polished and will be helped dramatically even by the impact and gravity that Chet Holmgren has. And of course, he's impacted and helped by the gravity that SGA has. And then I put Chet behind J-Dub because it typically takes big men a little bit longer to adjust to the NBA, and he's coming off of the injury, and who knows what the workload looks like, back-to-back, load management, all that stuff. Who knows what happens there with Chet Holmgren. So I'll put him behind J-Dub. And then you have Josh Giddey. Like, I think that Josh Giddey would be a fantastic player next year and will develop next year and will help the Thunder a lot next year. But there's just other things that J-Dub and Chet provide. But again, on this team, being number 4 is not a knock on this very, very young team. Oklahoman Caleb asks, top 5 front offices in the NBA. To me, it's OKC and Miami, 1, 2. Doesn't really matter who you put 1, who you put 2. I personally put OKC 1, but that would be called a homer pick. So just do with that what you will. Utah, I think, has to be up there now that they have Danny Ainge. I really respect and like what Danny Ainge is able to do, building rosters. I'll say Milwaukee, Toronto, other names that should be included on this list. I cannot stress enough. I think Washington is going to be in this conversation sooner than later. Once they kind of get things rolling in this rebuild and kind of get their bearings under them as a new regime, as a new front office. So cannot undersell Washington either. But this is a hard list to make, obviously. But that's just kind of where my head goes immediately. At SSN_OKC Thunder, chances of Draymond Green and OKC, very, very, very low. You don't want to say 0 whenever you're dealing with Sam Presti, because Sam Presti is going to be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat and surprise you, but very, very, very low. Number 1, and first and foremost, he's not the right vibe for OKC. Like, I think that the Thunder don't need a guy like Draymond Green in that locker room. But even on the floor, this isn't to discredit Draymond Green. It's the fact that the Thunder don't have the pieces to maximize his skill set. Like, when you look at Draymond Green, you are, first of all, there are people that already yell that this team is undersized. But also, you're looking at him, and oftentimes when you watch him, you're screaming at your television that he's setting moving screens and getting shooters open. We can debate the moving screens thing all day long. I don't like to fall on that kind of cop out most of the time. But nonetheless, his whole thing is playmaking, setting screens, getting shooters open that you just don't have in place right now at this moment, to where then it just kind of crams up your offense, in my opinion. So I don't think it's a good fit on the court or off the court. So I would say very, 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 very low. At Real Travion, he has a couple trades. First trade, would you trade pick 12 and give the Jazz back their 24 pick for pick 9? And would you trade pick 12 or would you trade pick, I guess just or, would you trade pick 12 for 10 and get back Bertans' contract for doing it? So yes, I would do both. I love that Jazz trade. I think that Jazz trade is pretty seamless. I really like what it is for OKC. I think that it gets you a bit of a new tier of player, and you can't take 4 players in the next draft anyway. And for the Jazz, sure, you might fall back a little bit too much for your liking in the draft, but you gain that flexibility to have your pick, even if it falls out of the top 10, if you start to surprise people again next year. For the Dallas trade, it's only 2 spots for OKC, and you might be saying, well, why would we do this for just 2 spots? I think that the Bertans contract is not that bad. Like, it's bad for a team like Dallas, who is strapped for cap space and still trying to improve their roster. For a team like OKC, they're going to do something with this cap space. And it's not going to be sign a massive free agent, you wouldn't guess, but they're not going to let this resource go to waste. And so of all the quote unquote bad contracts you can take back, I think that Bertans not only has a role to play like a Saric and Muscala did, but also when you look at the language in his contract for next season, it's super easy and manageable to move on from. So I think that there's just no downside for OKC. Now, would that be enough of an appeal to Dallas? Who knows? But I would do both of them if I was OKC. Real Travion also asked, is Amani Bates an OKC guy, and favorite restaurants in OKC? Quickly on Amani Bates. Off the floor, I'm not sure. Like, I haven't talked to Amani Bates or know anything about him off the floor besides what's been reported about him. That's more of a conversation for Sam Presti and them to have behind closed doors as they interviewed him, as they worked him out, all that good stuff. On the floor, he has a ton of bad habits that are not OKC Thunder play style, but the Thunder could afford to take him, pick 50 if he's on the board, or 37 even if you wanted to get crazy, and just stash him in the G League and work out those bad habits if they wanted to. But I wouldn't bet on him being a guy the Thunder draft, just because I think that at 37 it's too rich and you have better value on the board. And then at pick 50, he might not be there, and then who knows what you talk about then. But I just wouldn't bet on it working out with Monty Bates. Favorite restaurants in OKC, because I'm from Kentucky. I love Clark Crew Barbecue. We went there. Me, Daniel Bell, Joe Mazzato, and Clemente Almanza went there. Fantastic spot. It was my first time being there. Fantastic spot. Fantastic food. I also love Hideaway Pizza and the Jones. So that'd be my recommendations. You can also hear from others on Twitter about what they think. But there you go. At _Hansard, who would be Presti's boomer bust guy in this draft? So Coulibaly could be considered that, but you can go back and listen to Monday's draft profile on him. I don't think that there's bust potential there. So I wouldn't say him. I think that the 2 names would be Nick Smith Jr. and Gigi Jackson. Nick Smith Jr. for some reason is attached to OKC a lot in mock drafts. Don't really know why, but he's attached to them a lot in mock drafts. Had a really good high school career, suffered injuries and stuff at Arkansas that kind of hindered his college career. But he's a guy who could just boom, and like the high school stuff was real. He just was hurt and in an awkward scenario in Arkansas and couldn't show it. He also could just not be worth a 12th overall pick. Same with Gigi Jackson. Like Gigi Jackson, for it seemed like OKC, yes, it'd be the sticker shock of like doing it at 12. The night of the draft would be just eye popping and jaw dropping and conniption inducing for most people on Twitter. But when you take a step back, the Thunder have the ability to slow play him. They have the investment in the G League and the investment into development to where they can afford to practically have him be a non-factor this year and just play in the G League 90% of the time and work out some of those bad habits that he has on the floor and see where he goes from there, because he could be a very, very, very good player. So those would be the 2 like realistic boomer bust names that I could give you. At Enigmatics 6, thoughts on Sidy Cissoko? So circling back, Evan ETM loves Cissoko. I also love Cissoko. Really good playmaking, really good ball handling to run the floor in transition with 6'6", 6'10" wingspan. He is huge in person. When you're watching the Ignite team play in person, really good cutter, really good defender. I think he can be really good in the dunker spot and on pick and rolls as a roll man, even as a ball handler, maybe. And I like his upside as a catch and shoot shooter. He was pretty good at that, despite the overall percentages not being good from three overall. We'll get into him a lot more in the coming days before the draft, but I do like him. I really, really do. And then last one before the break, Rashid Daboy, would you extend Pokusevski for $20 million over the next 3 years? So yes, if I was the Thunder, I would totally do that. If I was Sam Presti, I would be happy if he would sign that, because that's going to be nothing, like literally nothing, as the cap continues to go up with expansion, with media rights, etc. It's going to be literally nothing. 20 million over 3 years, it'd be nothing. But this is what I wrote about on Thunders and Titians about the Poku extension eligible summer that he's going to enter into here in a couple weeks. The reason I don't see there being a contract extension for Poku is that it's just the worst timing possible. I think that the Thunder like Poku. I think that they want to continue to develop him, want to see what they have in him, and they like what he brought to the table before his injury as a connective player who played more under control and, scrap the whole unicorn stuff, just what he is as a player, as a rotational piece. I think that they like that. However, the Thunder typically do not let guys hit restricted free agency. He hasn't really done enough to warrant a good-sized contract, and they have a roster crunch coming up. So even though I think that the Thunder like him and want to continue to develop him, why would Poku take this deal? Like, if you're Poku, why would you take this extension when you could just bet on yourself and see if you can garner more money? Because $20 million over 3 years in NBA money, in the NBA world, is nothing. In the real life world, it is a ton of money. But in the NBA world, it's not going to be anything to where if you're Poku, you just much rather, I think, bet on yourself and see what you can do this summer. But again, Thunder full of surprises. Coming up, if you could spend a day with a Thunder player, who would it be and why? Would the Thunder consider trading Josh Giddey? Where should Rust end his career? And again, someone asked about my favorite albums of all time. That's all coming up on today's show. But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at Birddogs. Folks, I am wearing Birddogs right now. They are comfortable. They are versatile. They are fantastic. It sounds a lot like the Thunder, doesn't it? They build this versatile apparel that is convenient to wear and to experience, both when you're talking about going to a business meeting. You can wear these Birddog shorts and look appropriate. You can go play basketball. They're flexible and comfortable there. Playing basketball in these Birddog shorts and everything in between. So check them out today, because when you do, and you go to birddogs.com/LockedInNBA, or just enter the code LockedInNBA, you're going to get a free Yeti style tumbler with every order. That's birddogs.com/LockedInNBA for that free Yeti style tumbler. You will not want to take off your Birddogs. We promise you, because they are so fantastic, so comfortable, so versatile, so good. Check it out today. birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. At Call Me Klopp 35, if you could spend a day with a Thunder player, who would it be and why? What would you do? So, if we're talking about spending a day with a Thunder player, and we're looking at it through the scope of gonna make content, gonna podcast, gonna write articles, gonna tweet, gonna TikTok, gonna be entertained and make content for the people, it'd be J-Dub. Like J-Dub far away would be the pick there for like making content and doing stuff of that nature. If we're talking strictly just hanging out and just chilling, no cameras, no nothing, like we just are just truly hanging out for a day and moving on with our lives, and we can't talk about it afterward, it'd be Kenny Hustle. The vibe that you get from him is relaxed, is cool. Talking behind the scenes has been awesome, and everything about Kenny Hustle is just cool and laid back. I'd love to watch some college football, watch some TCU with them. It'd be cool out there with Kenny Hustle. So there's your answer, both ways. At SSN_New Jersey, could Giddey be traded this offseason, and what would be the return? I don't see a world in which Josh Giddey is traded this offseason. I think that the Thunder love him too much. He loves it being here too much, and there's just no return out there for Josh Giddey this summer. I don't know that the Thunder are in position right now to make a huge splash, but going back with Josh Giddey at M20 Workman, what are some realistic expectations for Josh Giddey next season and beyond? Could he be what people wanted Ben Simmons to be? I don't like the Ben Simmons comp because Ben Simmons, like, for as much as he is just, dogged on right now, right or wrong, in his peak, in what his peak could have been, he was an elite defender who could defend 1 through 5 and just shut down teams and was explosive, was athletic, was just yamming on people. Like, Ben Simmons is probably the furthest comp from Josh Giddey, besides the playmaking stuff and being big. The comp that I've used has been Jason Kidd. Like, if you want to think about the 1% ceiling, would be Jason Kidd. I think that what you're hoping for Josh Giddey would be like, he's probably just below a max player. He's one of the better playmakers, one of the best playmakers in the NBA. He can kind of fit in defensively and becomes a league average shooter. That's kind of what you're looking for with Josh Giddey. Obviously, he's already an elite rebounder for his position, which is great. But yeah, Ben Simmons just does not. It doesn't do it for me on the comp for Josh Giddey. At Bubba Check, where would you want to see Russ finish his career? Obviously, sign a one-day deal with OKC, or even sign a Udonis Haslem contract in OKC, but I don't think that Russ would ever want to be a Udonis Haslem guy where he's hardly ever playing and just being a mentor. I think he'd rather just coach at that point. But non-OKC teams, Washington, it seems like he really loved Washington. It seemed like he really fit in Washington. And then it seems like he really fits in with the Clippers. And then circling back to the Chris Paul thing, maybe Russ fits that too, where he mentors Ja on and off the floor, more relatable play style on the floor, and of course can help him off the floor, and of course can help Memphis in the meantime while Ja's suspended. So maybe that could work. I don't know, but good question. At Clemafu, would you package 12 and 37 for 8? Would I do it? Sure. Would Sam Presti do it? Sure. Would they do it? No. 37 and 12 is not enough for pick 8. At Mond 1010, what do you think of Scoot and any chance OKC gets him? I do not think that there's a chance OKC gets to pick 3, which is what you have to get to at a minimum. I really think you need to get to pick 10. Pick 2 to get Scoot. I wish it was pick 10, but pick 2 to get Scoot. I think that this is all like a Jabari Smith smokescreen with Charlotte. Like we all thought Jabari was going to go to Orlando. But I love Scoot. I think that people are overthinking this. Scoot is and should be the second player in this draft. In 90% of draft classes, he'd be the first player, if not 95% of draft classes, 97% of draft classes, whatever you want to put on it, he'd be the first player drafted. He is an elite player, elite athlete, elite culture setter, elite teammate, just an awesome player. And I think that he has better shooting ability than he showed. I think that he has better off-ball ability on offense than he showed. I love Scoot. And if somehow Sam Presti pulled that off, I would be dancing. I'd be dancing at the Thunder practice facility watching the draft. At Ben Glover, Clippers 24 pick and 12 for pick 8. I would do that. Obviously, that is the more appealing pick, I think, of all of them, because it's unprotected and because you can talk yourself into maybe things go off the rails in LA. Obviously, the Houston pick would be the most appealing, but you have to worry that, like, what if they just totally bottom out again, which I don't think is that likely, that they fall in the bottom 4, but they might have good enough odds to jump into the bottom 4. So, yeah, it's one of their more lucrative picks in 24, in my opinion. But for pick 8, sure. You can't take all 4 next year anyway. Does Amon being born 1 minute later factor into the draft decision making? No, but you do want all the data you can have. At Josh O'Fish, you a Filet-O-Fish fan? Maybe. I'm not, but maybe you are. What would it take to get 5 and 10? An unrealistic 3-team trade is what it would take to get 5 and 10. 3-team trades typically don't happen. They most often, I think, happen on draft night, but I don't see a pathway for it, although it would be very fun. I don't see a pathway for it. At Charles Cohen, should OKC get Kristaps Porzingis? I can see the appeal to want Kristaps Porzingis, but I just keep having this feeling that, like, the Thunder view Chet as a center. The Thunder don't want to rush into anything, and like the hardest thing to get right is that 4 or 5 pairing down low. And you don't want to make that 4-5 pairing decision when it might get complicated, like a Kristaps, like a, insert traditional big man here. Not that Kristaps is not a unicorn, but like a big man here. Like Walker and Hendricks to me don't count. Like a big man next to Chet. I don't think you want to do that yet. I think that you want to hold off on that. Same reason why you didn't take Jalen Duren last year. So I would also say, look at Dallas. Like Dallas had that success with Luka. They could tell he was going to be a special player, and then they just plowed through that wall and traded everything to New York for Porzingis. It didn't end up working as a pairing, and now people are already questioning Luka's future in Dallas. So like it can happen, boom, on a dime. Like, so I wouldn't love that to just jump in right now. I can see the appeal for it though. I can see the appeal for it, and if they did it, we would be getting reckless with our preseason predictions for what that pairing and what that team could be, depending on what the package would look like. At Thunder Talk YT, Chris Paul to OKC. I don't think that this will happen. I don't think that there's going to be a reunion or anything like that for the Thunder and Chris Paul in the cards, but we know that Chris Paul appreciated his time in OKC and the Thunder appreciate him. So I wouldn't say a 0% chance, but I don't think that it's likely. And then the last question at Cameron79. Favorite album of all time? I can't give you one album. I'll give you 6, but let's count it as 5. So just pick one of American Beauty and Working Man's Dead by the Grateful Dead. Put that one number 1. Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, number 2 by David Bowie. Total Entertainment Forever by Father John Misty, number 3. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band by the Beatles, number 4. Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd, number 5. Let me know what your top 5 albums are in the comments on YouTube and on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.